So our next speaker is Dr. Evan Los. Dr. Los is thankful to have found a balance of clinical work, teaching, research, and advocacy in his current career, while also being able to prioritize family. He currently works at East Tennessee State University and remembers being told during his training that you can't do everything, but really feels that he's found the right niche here 5 years out from training, and is going to share some of his experiences with us today and how he got from fellowship to a really rewarding career. He does remember Focus on Fellows as a key experience in helping him make this transition. And he, again, now is an assistant professor at East Tennessee State University in the Division of Pediatric Endocrinology. So Dr. Los, we're very excited to have you today and looking forward to your talk.
Great. Thanks very much for inviting me, and thanks for joining this afternoon. And yeah, I do have very fond memories of participate actually the first 5 years of the program, and as a fellow for 3 years, and then as an early career attending for another 2 years post fellowship. And so glad to be back and share a little bit about how I went from there to here, or for you from here to there. I'm also, I'm going to go ahead and share screen to bring up my talk. Great. And let's see if I can get through without having to do any updates for my computer. I don't have anything to disclose. Just starting off, my legs, or I guess my pedigree would look like it's very deep here with the American Diabetes Association, with a member since before my second birthday. But I think that was a typo on the part of the ADA. So I appreciate that they thought that since I could barely walk that I was involved. But I have been with the ADA since the beginning of fellowship, believe in its mission, believe in it as an organization, and it's really been terrific to stay involved through fellowship and early career, participate in programs like Focus on Fellows, and really look forward to being a part of ADA for years to come. So my objectives in this talk is to share a little bit of a personal story, just my own path from fellowship to early career attending. And I've been thinking about this a lot because I've been in my current position as assistant professor in pediatric endocrinology for 5 years. And now in my 6th year, I am putting together my promotion packet to apply for promotion to associate professor. And so as part of that, you look back on all of the things that you've done over the previous 5 years, and even back into fellowship. And so I've had this opportunity to look retrospectively at where I was and now where I am, and then also projecting where I hope to be. And that's good for, I think, everyone at every stage, is to recognize and acknowledge where we were, the hard work that we've done, where we are today, and what we can continue to do, and how we prioritize that to get where we want to be, whether it's 5 years from now or further down the road. So first, I'll be sharing my own path. Again, this is not to make myself look good, but in just sort of recognizing hard work that goes into fellowship and early career. And you can compare and contrast, but just to share opportunities that I've had. So first, as a physician, I am all of these things: a clinician, a researcher, a teacher, an advocate. And these are all the things that I am sort of as a career. But beyond that, also, I have other identities, other roles as a husband, a father, a community member, a citizen, and that goes on and on. If you're an athlete, you really care, you wear many hats. But I'm focusing in this talk mostly on career, and was always told that you're going to have to choose. You're going to need to be either a clinician or an educator or a researcher or work in advocacy. And maybe I didn't like that. I didn't know if it would be true or not, but I think now 5 years out from fellowship, I do feel like I've got a great balance of all of these. And so I wanted to be the counterpoint if any of you are being told that you can't do it all. You can, and you can do it while balancing being a really caring and loving family member. But you have to learn when to say yes and when to say no. And I think as a fellow, we all learn to say yes a lot. But as you're transitioning to being early career, if you want to be 5 years in and feel like you've got a nice balance, you actually really have to learn how to say no and to feel okay about it. So I tried to break this up into color bubbles to present these in ways that would maybe stick, and to kind of track each of these from fellowship into being early career attending. So in fellowship, started gaining clinical experience with the half-day of diabetes clinic and half-day of endocrine clinic, and plenty of time on rounds and staffing the hospital, doing consults, but also revising the DKA protocol at our university. And that was, kind of research, kind of quality improvement, but also it had a clinical basis to it. I was developing and launching Turner syndrome clinics and transgender clinics, was able to get some mini grant awards, again, to support the clinical work that we were doing in Turner syndrome and type 1 diabetes, and then work on quality improvement projects. And as I carried that forward from fellowship to attending roles, I'm growing a clinical practice. When I started my position, it was, I did my training in Portland, Oregon, but then started practice in East Tennessee. And there's a lot of things that are quite different about those places. But literally on my first day, I had 0 established patients. And so I had to grow a clinic, and that's often your job in the first little bit of your career. And so now I do 7 half days, or 70% of my time is spent in the clinical role seeing patients. I'm interestingly took the DKA protocol that I wrote as a fellow, and it is now the DKA protocol that is used in a 21 hospital system in East Tennessee and Southwest Virginia. So that work that I did in fellowship carried forward. We developed diabetes pathways that go with the patient throughout the hospital. We optimized inpatient diabetes care protocols. I also work as a regional newborn screening consultant for the newborn screening program. And you'll recognize that your clinical role extends beyond the 4 walls of your office or of those of your hospital, that you will get calls from any provider who sees you as an expert because they're looking for assistance with their own patients. So lots of pediatric providers are reaching out and asking what to do with their patients. So that's clinical. It's also community service, but you will get asked more and more management questions as an attending. So research in fellowship, I started off with 2 sort of clinical areas of interest that grew into research areas of interest. One was within diabetes, looking at diabetes alert dogs, and was fortunate enough to work with a few other collaborators in residency and then into fellowship. And these projects we were able to get published in Diabetes Care, and then Journal of Diabetes Science and Technology. Was asked to write review articles looking at technology use in transition age youth, and then presenting at ADA on some more basic science research that I was able to do as an attending, looking at the biochemical fingerprint of hypoglycemia in human breath. So that was within diabetes research. I knew I was never going to be heavy duty into research, and so when I'm 70% clinical, 30% everything else, including teaching and research, like there are weeks that I do no research, there are weeks that maybe I get 5 hours a week, but I knew I was never going to be running a lab. But I've got clinical questions that then I can go and do some research in. My other area of interest was in Turner syndrome, and specifically looking at blood pressure in Turner syndrome. Carried that forward with some case reports, was involved with some writing groups for Turner syndrome, and then writing review articles that are relevant to the Turner's community. And then once you're an attending, people ask you to write stuff all the time. So I just started writing. And some of these are easy things to write, little review articles. I think that last one is most recent, which is, I thought it was fascinating. It was just, it started as a clinical case. It was a kid with new onset type 1 diabetes who then developed some neurologic symptoms on day 2 after diagnosis, and ultimately was found to have a brain abscess. And so we wrote it up and got it published a couple months ago. So that's the kind of stuff that doesn't take a ton of time to do. Even when you're 70% clinical, you can usually find a couple of medical students and a fellow, which is the other co-authors. The first 2 are third-year medical students. The third is a fellow who was helping us out with the project, and me. And so we wrote it up and got it published. I think it's the first time I've ever submitted something and it didn't even come back like, accepted with revisions. It was just accepted. And I was like, what? Like, don't you want to fix my grammar or anything? They're like, nope, just accepted. So, honestly, the time investment to then get a nice peer-reviewed publication, sometimes it's surprising that you can put in 5 hours of work and end up with a product that you're really proud of. Other times you can spend 3 years of fellowship on something that maybe it's hard to get published. So you do have to be okay with spending time, I think, in research. And I think I'm willing to put in some time, which is why case reports, review articles, and little focused research questions, that's going to be where I feel successful. But I had to learn that. I knew that I shouldn't be the PI on a huge project that spans multiple universities and multiple years. That's going to be something that I won't really be able to commit to. So be thinking about how much research you want to do. And for me, it always comes back to the clinical care. The clinic and the patient in the exam room is probably where my heart is the most, but I have interesting questions and I want to be able to try to find answers to them. So that's what motivates my research. When any opportunity presents itself to share your work, please go ahead and do it. Whether that's a student research forum, an institutional, research night, regional conferences, national conferences, take any opportunity you can to get your name out there, get your poster out there, and you will be surprised at who looks you up later, writes you an email about it, or even wants to get some media coverage about it. And so if you are looking for any media coverage, make sure you check with your university media liaison. This is personal advice, that if you think you've got some groundbreaking research, make sure you let somebody know. When I started talking about diabetes alert dog, I guess doing a series with 8 patients made me the world expert. And so I started getting interviewed on NPR, and then pretty soon my university media group was like, who are you talking to? And I think we need to make sure that you're saying the right things. So do make sure that if you want to be in the media, that you know what you're asking for. This is a little documentary that I got asked to be a part of, Luke and Jedi. It's available online. It's kind of a cute little diabetes documentary. Here's fellowship and teaching. So you obviously are going to be a student of endocrinology forever and student of diabetes forever. And but your role as a teacher will only grow. You will be teaching other trainees, you'll be teaching cross-discipline, you'll be potentially giving grand rounds and other special opportunities to teach as well. Through fellowship, that was true, and then as an attending, even more. So at all levels, you'll be teaching your future colleagues, your community providers. If you're running rounds, you're going to be a teacher on rounds. When you're doing a phone consult, you're going to be teaching as you go. And then advocacy. This is, things you have to know what builds you up, I guess. The things that turn your heart on, find your passions, and that's where I think advocacy work can be really valuable. So literally one of my job search criteria as I was looking post fellowship where I wanted to land was a place that would allow me to continue to be a camp physician at a diabetes basketball camp in Oregon. And so I had really the reason I'm in East Tennessee is they said, yeah, that sounds like a great opportunity. Sure, you can always have the last week of July off. And it's written into my contract that I can always be gone the last week of July to go to this diabetes basketball camp, and I don't have to count it as vacation time. Some of the other places I was looking couldn't make that guarantee, and that was the difference maker in where I was going to choose. So know what's really important to you. Being involved with other diabetes advocacy groups like JDRF, ADA, those are incredibly valuable things I look forward to, I enjoy doing, and then when I look back on, I can feel proud of it. So I did that in fellowship. I've been part of the Diabetes and Youth Special Interest Group through ADA. I was their communications director. I was on the membership advisory group board for American Diabetes Association. Continue to be on medical staff at the basketball camp. I've taken multiple pies in faces to raise money for diabetes. And those are just the fun things that you get to do. You may not get paid for them, but they're the things that you really enjoy. So looking at the tangible steps that you can do over the next few years, I would take advantage of any supplemental experience that you can. Starting, potentially with what you're doing exactly right now. Focus on fellows. Not every fellow is doing this. There are lots of fellows out there who are not part of this program and who are missing out. And so anytime you have an opportunity to do something extra, go ahead and take it. The Endocrine Fellows Retreat, Pediatric Endocrine Society Visiting Fellowship, these are all things that may only last a few days or a week or a couple of weeks, but they stick with you and they stand out. And I think they do kind of punctuate our multiple years of training in the clinical world. And they really do, they build you up, but they also broaden it's not just practicing within your clinic or within your hospital. It really opens up sort of the entire world of endocrinology to you. Choose one or two areas to really focus and develop some expertise. I would still call myself a generalist in pediatric endocrine in that I'm in a relatively small program. I need to be able to see everything, but you can still have expertise within that area. And so for me, it's still type 1 diabetes, it's diabetes technology, but it's also Turner syndrome. It's not saying I don't do the other things, but those are the things where I can take a special interest. Go to as many conferences as you can, present as often as you're invited to, ask to present, make professional contacts, and then to be able to get involved in advocacy. It was literally my very first focus on fellows, which is in San Francisco, I think. I met a guy who was he was really engaging. He was a fellow a couple years ahead of me. And ultimately, he ended up being a faculty member at a university that's in my same state where I am now. And once I took my job here, I'd been on the job like 2 weeks. And he said, hey, would you come out to Vanderbilt and give grand rounds? And I was like, why would you want to hear from me? I was a fellow 3 weeks ago. And he said, yeah, absolutely, come on out. So we arranged that. And it was that contact through Focus on Fellows that, plugged me into that opportunity. And then, through that got opportunities with ADA. And so the things that you do that are extra is what's going to set you apart and open up other opportunities as well. So sometimes those are advocacy, sometimes those are research, sometimes those are these extra supplemental experiences. Job search, I'll just go real quick. These are things for you to consider. What kind of work do you want to do? Do you have an academic mind? Do you want to be teaching? Do you want to be in a community practice, inpatient, outpatient? The jobs that you apply for should line up with the values about how you want to spend your time and how your brain works. If you don't like medical students, don't go into academics. You're going to be surrounded by med students forever. If you don't like seeing patients, don't be a clinician. If you don't like research, don't make your career dependent on getting that next big grant, because it might not come through and then you don't have a job. What size? And this is something, I thought I wanted to always be at kind of a bigger place, but I ended up taking a job at a smaller place because I found I could have a bigger impact, actually. Going a place that has a great need was very fulfilling to me. You have to know yourself. If you go to a place that has 18 other endocrinologists, you could kind of go or not go, and that place may not really notice. They could find somebody else. And so, yes, you're filling a need, you're always valuable, but I found that going to a place that was underserved, understaffed, it actually meant I could make a big difference every day. And whether I went or didn't go really mattered. And that actually felt really good to me. Think about how much call you take, think about how this affects your family. And literally, like, my commute in this semi-rural East Tennessee is short enough that I could walk home if I needed to. I could bike if the weather was better, and if I drive, it's 5 minutes. And so that's really different than if I was in a big city and I was commuting 45 minutes each way, because those 45 minutes in the morning and in the evening, that might be breakfast with my family and dinner with my family before bedtime. And so if I'm in the car somewhere, I miss out on those things. But know what your gifts and your skills are and go where you're most needed. That's where you're going to find fulfilling work. When you wake up every day and you say, what I'm doing really is going to make a difference today. So these are, again, practical advice. When you start your first real job, beware of clinical creep. There's always more to do in the clinic. You can always overbook another patient, and it always feels like the right thing to do. But you also realize that when you do that, you shut out the opportunity for advocacy, research, for extra teaching, or to get home on time so that you can eat dinner with your family. And the clinical creep is you saying yes, 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 always book another patient. And so learning to say no is the answer to clinical creep. There's huge learning your first year out of fellowship. Be ready for it, be open to it. It's still a great opportunity. The learning curve is still steep, but it's really fun. Stay connected to your national organizations, go to conferences, stay involved with Focus on Fellows, come back to ADA scientific sessions. The virtual meeting is, there's actually really nice things about it where you can kind of be in multiple rooms at the same time at ADA. And then if we're back in person at some point, then it's a great way to meet your colleagues across the country and around the world, see how diabetes is done differently in other places. And to make those personal connections are really, really valuable. Diabetes is both a huge world, but it's also pretty small. And so I have folks that I'll call when I've got clinical questions because I met them at ADA a couple of years ago. Always make progress on your career advancement. So know what your promotion and tenure requirements are so that you can be working towards those. I wish I had saved my evaluations from the grand rounds that I've given, because I just got an email from my division chief who said, hey, I need those because that's part of your promotion packet. I'm going, where do I get those? So hold on to every evaluation you ever get, student evaluations, grand rounds evaluations, because you have to submit those. Find senior faculty that can really mentor and guide you. My own personal favorite is be co-investigator and co-author on projects. It takes a lot of work to be a good PI. You can be a good co-I and not have to invest, lots of nights and weekends in getting a successful project. You can really benefit the project. Your name's on it. It counts for a lot of credit when you're going up for promotion. You can't be PI on every project. There's just not enough time. And then get help with grants if your career depends on them. And then a plug for ADA, definitely be a member. It's super cheap for early career folks. So everybody, if you're not already a member, make sure you become one. Make sure when you are no longer a fellow that you still qualify for that early career discount. And then even when you don't qualify for the discount, just do it. It is so valuable. It's worth every dollar. It's helpful to be in the special interest group forums. I've learned so much just monitoring the chatter that goes on, whether it's in like the COVID-19 group on the ADA or whatever. It's, I hear about sort of the pulse of the endocrine and diabetes community through those special interest group forums. There's opportunity for advocacy and involvement. If you say, I'm interested in serving on a committee, you're probably going to get tapped to serve on a committee. And there we go. And ADA is where professional connections start. It's super valuable. All right. Lastly, how do you discern which opportunities to explore? Maybe it's supposed to be harder than this, but I really just have a couple slides on this. One is you only have limited time, and you can't say yes to everything, and you're going to run out of time if you always say yes. So you have to know yourself. If you have big questions that you need to answer, like big research questions, you better be looking for a job where you can do some research. If you don't like medical students, don't do academics. Depends on how you feel about investing time in writing papers. Does it feel so good to have your name on a paper that you want to do it some more? Or are you never want to look at that paper again because you put in 3 years of your life and just barely got it published? So it depends on how you feel about that. Do you love diabetes camp? Does that need to be part of your life? Do you thrive as a teacher? Do you want to see patients every day for the rest of your career? These are all important questions to know about yourself as you're choosing a job. When do you say yes? How do you know? Is it going to advance your career? Will I enjoy it or be proud of it? And do I have the bandwidth? Those are really the three things. If you have to say no to any of these, like you need 3 yeses to say yes. If you say no to any of these, you shouldn't say yes. And in short, will this build you up as a person, as a physician? Saying no, this is the hard one. You'll have to practice it. It feels really hard to say no, especially as a fellow. People ask you to do things. You can't just say, no, I'm just not going to do it. But as an attending, you have to do this because people will keep asking you to do stuff, but you have to say no. You have to be okay missing some opportunities. That's actually okay. And so this is something I like. This was my line. It happened to be because my wife was pregnant with our third. And I was like, no, I can't take on anything else new. Like that would not be fair. That's not appropriate. And so this was like my line for 2 months. For the next 2 months, I'm saying no to anything new. And it was really hard to do, but it was so necessary. And every once in a while, when we get to a super busy season and I need to kind of dial it back, I bring this statement back. And folks respect it, actually. If something's going to bring you down, if it's going to just zap your bandwidth, if it's going to hurt your time with your family, if it's not going to advance your career, if you're emotionally just going to be drained, say no, and then feel good about it. So here's your life balance. There's always more to do at work. You have to stop on purpose. Make sure that when you walk in the door at the end of your day, you're bringing your best home. You want to bring your best home to your spouse, to your partner, to your family, your kids. You don't want to bring home a tired, frustrated, overburdened person and then release that on your family. That's not fair to them. So make sure that when you walk in, whether maybe you have to fake it a little bit, but if you're tired, like take your deep breath and then go in and make sure that you are there. If you're coming home tired every day and really burnt out, you're doing too much. You need to say no. Your partner is super critical in navigating these busy seasons. And you've probably asked them to do things in residency or fellowship where you've been busy. They're still important as a faculty attending as well, but you need to let them know when you're going to be busy, when that time is going to calm down again, so that they can partner with you. They are super important to your career success by making sure that you're successful at home as well. And then just a word about flexibility. I think there's huge perks actually to being in a small program. Again, you get to go where you're needed. You probably get to design what your job looks like. I came here when it was me and one other peds endocrinologist who was actually the fellow who trained a year ahead of me. And so we knew each other really well. We didn't have a boss, really. I mean, we had the Department of Pediatrics chair, but nobody knew what a pediatric endocrinologist was supposed to do. And so we got to make it up. And we wrote all the protocols. We decided when rounds were. We decided what the clinic was going to look like, the staff we needed, but we designed it. And so those are the potential perks of a small program. Is if I wanted to go to my the preschool theatrical production, I said, hey, Tuesday at 10:30, my schedule just needs to be clear. so I can go do that. And it was like, okay, let's do it. The first day I showed up, I had a parking spot with my name on it. Like, what? Where does that? That does not happen in fellowship. I like showed up and I've got a corner office with windows. I'm like, I shared an office with 5 other people with no windows in fellowship. So, going to a small place has a lot of perks, and then being able to commute home in 5 minutes is huge. So that was probably my most surprising part of work-life balance that I really appreciate about a small program. I get to be a member of a Rotary group, be a good citizen, play some pickleball, and then it all comes back for my beautiful family that I love. When my daughter scraped her knee, this was a couple of years ago, but she scraped her knee and I'm putting a Band-Aid on it. She's kind of nervous. And I'm like, Megan, what's my job? And I'm expecting her to say, oh, doctor, okay, this is gonna be fine. And she goes, breakfast maker. And I'm like, that's right, I'm the breakfast maker. And that was like the best thing that I can hear, because one of my many jobs is I make the breakfast every day. And I probably wouldn't be able to do that if I was at a big place where I needed to leave an hour before rounds started and commute. It's been the biggest joy is to be at a small program. Here's my final thoughts. Be a member of ADA, plug in. You are already on the way to your early career. So recognize the paths that you're going down right now. Make sure that the ones that you're on are going to be building you up. Say yes to those. For the ones that aren't getting you anywhere, be able to say no and use your energy and your bandwidth elsewhere for something that's productive. And then I put my email on there if anybody has any follow-up questions. Glad to take those offline, or if the moderators can let me know if we've got any time left, I'm glad to take any right now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Loos. I do want to ask all of the attendees, if they have any questions, please do put them in the chat or put the raise hand up in the reactions. While we're waiting on questions, I just had one to get us started, which is you are so productive in so many different ways. You have your hand in a lot of different areas, but I think a lot of people find it very difficult, especially early in their career, to ask for any protected time at all, even something like a 70-30. Do you have any recommendations for, talking to your division chief, or kind of making the argument that that little bit of protected time can really boost your career or do good for the division?
Yeah, certainly. So, I did have a model in that the other pediatric endocrinologist that I was joining was already 70-30. So it's kind of easy for me to say, I want to do what he's doing. So I guess I didn't have to advocate too hard for that, but it is interesting. Like when you have split time, and essentially my clinical time kind of belongs to the hospital and the clinic. My academic time belongs to the university. Everybody wants you to do everything. And the clinical folks don't understand that on Wednesdays and also Friday afternoons, my 3 half days that I'm academic, that if there's clinical stuff, my door may be closed. I may not be responding to emails very quickly because I may be off doing something else. So I think practically, it's just letting people know when you are available and when you aren't available. Not that you have to don't be mean about it or anything. And if there's, clinical needs, they need to know, hey, I can just go down to your colleague down the hall. Sometimes it's a Post-it note on my door. Like literally there's a Post-it note on my door right now that says do not disturb giving a Zoom talk from this time to this time. So that's how you can carve it out. But as far as setting up your actual contract and saying, hey, I need this time, absolutely. Even though we're at, this little East Tennessee State University, nothing against them, but they're not an academic powerhouse, but they would love to get their name out there. And so for me to say, hey, would you, I applied for a grant and got $10,000 support to do that biochemical fingerprint of hypoglycemia in human breath study. And I said, hey, would you support this? This is the first time that anybody in pediatric endocrine has ever done any research. And they were like, yeah, absolutely. I got the grant. And then I said, well, I want to be able to present it at ADA. So let's make sure that you would pay for my travel and my hotel and my you know, the fee to go to the conference? And they're like, yeah, for sure. And then all you have to do is say, hey, I work at ETSU, and they're happy. So it honestly, it doesn't take that much, I think, for folks to honor it, especially if you're at an academic university. If I was purely community-based, they may not love that I'm spending a bunch of time writing up case reports. But as long as you're involving med students, you're having med students and residents shadow you, you're talking with fellows, it becomes really clear about who's interested in teaching, who's interested in research. When the first year med students say, hey, we're doing a forum on pediatric subspecialists, and we'd like you to come and, you know, spend 30 minutes over your lunch to talk to us about, you know, what it's like being a pediatric subspecialist. Like, those are the things you absolutely say yes to. When I said yes to that, there were 2 first-year med students in that crowd who are now the 4th-year med students who wrote that case report that we just got published. So those are the kind of things, when you say yes to one thing, to the right things, it will put you in a position to make good collaborations that, you know, not that it's all about you, that it comes back, but those are the things that are fun, is making those connections. Think about when you were early in your career, you know, a step ago, 2 steps ago, and who it was that you looked up to and said, wow, they're involving me. They're very interested. Like, figure out who those people are. You can't mentor every medical student out there, but you can mentor one. Do it.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I don't see any comments in the chat, and we are just past time, so I want to let everyone get to the workshops.
And sorry, there's one really quick one. I think they said, how was your call? I always imagined it would be terrible if wasn't a large group to share it with. There was a lot of call, but it was low burden. So we had nurse triage line. And so we are now a group of 3. So we're on every 3rd week. But with our nurse triage line, we take about 1 phone call per night. And we usually are consulting on somewhere between 1 and 3 patients in the hospital. So it's a lot of call, but it's not hard.